Okay, we're back, and our guest right now is a very special guest who's authored a book called One Question. Yes, life-changing answers from today's leading voices. Delighted to have with us Ken Coleman. He is a commentator, has his own show, The Ken Coleman Show. And Ken, nice to have you. Where are we Skyping you in from?
We are in the Atlanta suburbs, just northeast of Atlanta.
Well, nice to have you with us today. Thanks for giving us some of your time. You know, and I understand that this book is a culmination of all the interviews you do. Now that I'm interviewing you, someday you can interview me.
Right, that's right.
And so that's how you came about with this book, from all the people you've talked to through the years?
Well, it was the genesis of the idea. I was doing some yard work one day. I don't know about you, but that's where I get a lot of great clarity, when I can do some monotonous work and let my brain kind of run. And, you know, I'm one of the MCs at the Catalyst Conference, the nation's largest evangelical leadership conference. Yeah. And I get to interview a lot of people. I host a podcast as well. And so I was doing yard work one day and simply came up, I believe God gave me the idea to create a concept, an audio blog called One Question with Ken Coleman. And I simply cut out what I thought were the best one question and one answers from some of the top interviews that I had been able to do. And it went kind of viral. And it was about a 3-minute product or less. And out of that was approached about turning it into a book concept. And so for the book specifically, before I ever chose a guest, I spent a couple days down here in this basement office just thinking through life's biggest questions or life's biggest answers that we need, right? Topics. Yeah. I divided it into 3 sections: succeeding, surviving, and sustaining. And out of that, I began to develop all the big questions. So, for instance, in succeeding, we're talking about niche with John Maxwell, or we're talking about vision with T.D. Jakes, you know, or you just picked it. I mean, we have an unbelievable list of business authors, the best business authors of the last decade. And so, you know, we're asking about hard work with Malcolm Gladwell. How do we chase personal greatness with Jim Collins, as an example? Right. And so that's how I came up with the book. And after I determined the topics, the questions, then I went out and sought after people that I thought could answer it best. And some of them I had already interviewed, some I had not. Well, by the way, tell Gabe you and I talked, okay? I know Gabe pretty well. Okay, great. Okay. Well, listen, let's talk about a few of these. I understand one of them was former President Jimmy Carter, and he suggests how we should maybe accept life changes. What were your thoughts on that interview? Yeah, you know, I specifically wanted him first for the topic, which was reinvention. I think that one of the areas in life that many of us get tripped up is when seasons change. And as those seasons change, obviously circumstances change, and we have to change along with it. Now, I don't suggest that we have to change our beliefs or our principles, but we do have to be able to adapt. And here's a man that, whether you agree with his politics or not, he left the presidency under a cloud of disappointment, let's just put it that way. And yet he didn't just go hit the rubber chicken circuit and cash in on being president. He dug deep and got involved with Habitat for Humanity, and then became an ambassador for peace, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, again, I thought he was a great example of a man who reached the pinnacle of his career and yet didn't have great success and had to kind of change. What do you do when you're president of the United States and you're out of office and you still have plenty of life to live? Right. And I think he set a great example for all of us in accepting change, but reinventing ourselves with that season of change and continuing to make a difference. What a tremendous lesson. John McCain, you talked to him about finding courage when he had no freedom. Yeah, again, when I came to the idea of conviction and courage, I looked up him because he was my first choice, Senator John McCain. And he had a quote from years ago about how conviction is really the fuel that gives us the ability to have courage when we need it most. And so he tells the story in this particular chapter, one of my favorite chapters. He tells the story of being obviously in the prison in Ho Chi Minh City, and he gets the opportunity to go home if he recants his belief in the United States and says, hey, we were wrong and I committed all these war crimes, which he didn't commit. And he at one point says to the guards, there's no way I'm going to do this. And they said, but you won't, no one will know your name. And he said, but I will know. I will know. And he said, so that lesson is what I'd give to every young person. When the temptations of life come, make sure that you understand that when no one else may know, you will actually know. And, going back a step, John Maxwell is a mentor of mine. He's also in the book. He says this all the time, and he's right. He said, you've got to make the big decisions in life very early on, and then spend the rest of your life managing those decisions. And that speaks to the conviction that John McCain is talking about. And once we make the big decisions early, when the opportunities come for us to be tempted, or the opportunities come where we need to step up and have courage, if we've made the decision early on, then courage comes because we do what we believe. It's too late to have courage if you don't believe in something.
Wow, good stuff. Again, the name of the book is called One Question, Life-Changing Answers from today's leading voices, Ken Coleman, and he's a talk show host. It's put out by Howard Books. I would assume you could find it at the Christian bookstores as well as online. And let me encourage you to get a copy at Howard Books as the publisher. Again, One Question. There's a lot of other personalities I want to get to when we have time here, but did you find a faith common thread through these interviews?
Well, it's an interesting question. Let me just say real quick to your listeners, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted people to grasp the timeless wisdom in this book. And each chapter is 4 pages long. And I did that on purpose because I wanted a book that was easy to read, but that gave you the beef right off the bat. And I want to tell your listeners, if they go to onequestionbook.com, I've got 3 free chapters up there, no strings attached. They don't have to give me an email address, nothing. They just click on them. And it features Mark Burnett, who created The Voice, Lou Holtz, the legendary Notre Dame coach, and Marcus Buckingham, the strengths expert. So I just wanted to let your audience know it's totally free. Go kick the tires.
All right, good, thanks.
To your question, no, this is not a faith-based book. And in fact, really the only personalities in the faith world that are featured in the book would be T.D. Jakes and Andy Stanley. I asked T.D. Jakes about vision casting, and then I asked Andy Stanley about the now. So many of us that are wired for ambition, we understand this temptation. I struggle with it big time. And the temptation is to always be thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next. And I have learned in my own life, and I think this is true of so many of your listeners today, is that if we obsess about what's next, we'll miss what God has for us in the now, and ultimately and sadly sacrifice the next. And it's a huge, huge temptation for all of us. And I think we have to say, hey, God's got me right here, right now, and I'm here on purpose. And it's okay to have an eye on the next, but not to obsess, because we need to be asking these questions. Who does God have me to serve now? Who am I supposed to love now? Who am I supposed to learn from now? Who am I supposed to pour into now? What are those questions in your life that you need to be asking about the now? And so there's not a huge faith component, so therefore there's really not a huge tie-in there. I think the tie-in is I'm highlighting the power of a great question. I say in the book that good questions inform, but great questions transform. And is there not a better example of transformational question asking than Jesus himself?
Wow. Well said. I find it interesting that you chose Andy Stanley to talk about the now. I really enjoyed his book called Visioneering, which was, visioning into the future.
Well, and the gist, though, the reason I asked him is because Andy, as a leader, has done a marvelous job of making sure that he focuses on what he's supposed to be doing. And so he gives 5 questions in that chapter that he asks himself when opportunities come his way. And again, it speaks back to this point I just made. And I'll give you the 5th question. We'll save the other 4 for those who go buy the book.
Okay.
But the question he always asks himself when he gets an opportunity, Perry, is this: why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And if the opportunity that's being presented to me doesn't fit within that major question, then I have to say no to it. One of my mentors from afar, I never got a chance to meet him. His son, Tom Ziglar, is in the book. But Zig Ziglar is someone I admire greatly. And he once said, we've got to figure out a way to say no to the good so we can say yes to the best. And I think that's the core issue there.
How has this changed you? It appears to me, Ken, that you did this at a critical, if not a decision or a crossroad times of your life.
There's no question. I'm right now in the transition from my day job to my dream job, which is the radio show. We have some television opportunities that are beginning to present. I'm writing, I'm speaking, obviously. And I learned so much. I'll tell you honestly, the book features 34, as you know, unique one-question interviews. So it's 34 different questions, 34 major topics, 34 great voices that give us wisdom. And every chapter I learned something. I mean, I could not help it. In fact, that's why I wanted to write a book like this. I wanted to bring the reader with me and give them a upfront front row seat, right? Or step behind the velvet rope. And because I do get this blessing of interviewing some of the great minds in our world. And I learned so much. I got to tell you, I mean, I could go chapter by chapter by chapter and tell you what I've learned. I'll tell you the biggest takeaway from the book, the Jim Collins chapter. Of course, Jim Collins is probably the most respected business voice on great companies, obviously the author of Good to Great. Right. I asked him a question. I said, what is the reason why we don't pursue personal greatness? So many of us don't go after personal greatness, yet we want a great vacation, we want a great restaurant, and so forth and so on. He basically said, we're not risk averse, we're ambiguity averse, and that's why we don't chase greatness. He said most of us would rather live a life of paint by numbers, what we think is safe, what we think we know is coming around the corner, instead of taking a blank canvas and painting our own masterpiece.
Boy, that's powerful. Good stuff. Ken, thanks for your time. Have you back. I enjoyed this, and I'm going to look forward to finishing the book and call you back and go through some more of these interviews that you had, and keep up the good work. Let's stay in touch. Say hi to Gabe. He'll tell you all about me when you talk to him, and I'll tell him all about you then when we interviewed you.
Hey, appreciate being on. I appreciate it.
All right, God bless you. Have a good day. We'll be right back.